Hello, everyone, and welcome to the keynote panel of the 11th Symposium of Rising Scholars. My name is Annie Peuquet, and I have the honor of being Polygence's Director of Partnerships, as well as our panel moderator for today. Congratulations to all of our presenters so far today, and I can't wait to see the second half of presentations after this panel. Our panel topic for today is keeping your head above water in the college admissions process, and I am delighted to be joined by two experts in the college admissions and counseling space, Marina Lee and Shayantan Rahman. We are delighted that both Shayantan and Marina are with us today to share their expertise and perspective on this very important topic. Now, I will pass it off to our panelists to introduce themselves before we dive in. Shayantan, can you start us off, please?
Great. I'm Shayantan, or Shay for short. So I'm the founder of College Lab. We're a counseling firm and mentoring firm based in India. We've been around since 2017, and I'll share more details about our story later in this session. Personally, I did my undergraduate degree in economics and management from Oxford University and went on to do my MPhil in economics from Cambridge. After working for a bit in finance and research in the UK, I moved back to India in 2016 to work in education and education technology. Thank you for having me, Annie, and it's great to be presenting along with Marina.
Thank you so much, Shay. Marina?
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Shayantan. Shay, that's much better. So I'm a founder of Peuquet Education Initiatives, and I've had about 25 years of experience in education, youth development, and mission guidance. And the reason for doing what I do, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, is that when I noticed a lot of students coming to the United States to study or to college, there were a lot of social skills and academic skills, or even just how to navigate colleges that could have been better for them to have a better successful navigation throughout the whole process. So that's what we do. And quick thing is that I am ex officio of Independent Education Consultants Association and part of the Harvard Grad School of Education, 100 Stories of Impact and Supporting Students to be Innovative Leaders. And currently, and have been for the past 8 years, a mentor for the Harvard College students for their first gen program. Thank you, Annie. Happy to be here. I'm excited to present to all of you soon.
Fantastic. I know your backgrounds and expertise bring invaluable perspectives to our audience members today. So before we dive in, I'll provide an overview of what we will cover today. So each of our panelists will speak for about 10 minutes before we open the session for a moderated Q&A. Our panelists will speak to the following guiding questions. What are some of the principles we should keep in mind throughout the college admissions process? How can we help students identify their own individual goals and aspirations for college amidst all of the noise out there? How can students find balance in this process? And how can students prioritize their decision-making to find the absolute best college for who they are and what they want to do? As we see from our incredible student presenters today, you as students have extraordinary passions and interests. The goal of college should be to help you develop and explore those passions on the road to meaningful careers and purposeful impact in the world. It is easy for the college admissions space to feel at times very noisy and hard to navigate, and also plagued by achievement culture. Today, we'll talk about how to drown out that noise and chart a path that best serves you and your dreams and ambitions. So let's jump in. As our panelists speak, please drop your questions into the Q&A feature on Zoom, and I'll bring them to our panelists during the Q&A portion. Shayantan, over to you to start us off.
Thanks, Annie. So I think just to go with the theme of the presentation, a lot of the values behind why me and my team started College Lab resonate strongly with it. Because a lot of us, and in fact, not just me, but the first 3 mentors on our team, are all people who've actually spent most of our school lives studying outside of India, but then we ended up finishing high school in India, myself for 2.5 years, the rest for the last 3 or 4 years. And we all sort of found different problems when we were making that transition from an Indian high school over back to universities overseas. So when we started, we actually started by working both with families and with quite a few schools to set up their guidance counseling systems. And these were the goals we laid out for ourselves. We wanted the mentorship and the guidance to be personalized. Before we started working with a lot of schools, they were just large group sessions. We wanted our counselors and the school counselors to work with students on a one-on-one basis. And to also, and we are a South Asia-based firm, so there's always a focus on academic success. But we also wanted students to focus on their personal growth, focusing on things in terms of beyond academics, what their values, what their objectives should be. And also, we had to understand that while many of us in my core team all studied in the US or the UK, students are increasingly looking at options outside of these countries. Maybe many are even looking at acquiring skills to be successful in Indian universities or in options, in Asia or in Europe that weren't open to them before. So that's how we started. Yeah, we can jump to the next slide, Annie. So over the years, we've sort of coalesced around these 5 principles when we work with students. So the idea is for each student, we run a series of exercises and we map out how to work on their holistic development. While they have an academic roadmap that we help them with, we also have a roadmap for personal development. We have goal setting exercises where they can get to understand what they need to do. Most of our students work with us quite early on in their high school journey. Many come on board in 8th and 9th grade. So they're not really thinking about the college admit till later on. The focus there is what should they be doing and what should they be learning in order to be excited about a set of career options. And that's where authenticity also comes in. In India, there's always a tendency to look to family and look to seniors for guidance, and maybe sometimes they end up replicating the same career decisions without thinking about whether it's relevant for them. So we try to have conversations with the students as well as with their teachers, with their guidance counselors in school, and most importantly, with their parents, to help them understand how to build a proper support system to help a student focus on her or his own storyline. And again, our guidance has to be personalized for this. So a lot of our sessions involve a lot of one-on-one mentorship. We also try to align, students with what their options are across the world. Since we've started, maybe 2017, we've had most of our students aiming for colleges in the US and the UK, but this year we have students going off to college in Switzerland, to Italy, to Spain, to even to Japan. So we've seen students' preferences change drastically about where they want to be. And most importantly, when we are helping them with this global outlook, what's the long-term vision? College, what we try to say is college is a next step in your longer academic journey. So they need to understand what they want out of college as a growth experience, not just go to college and hope that everything else will magically figure itself out. And yeah, so sorry, next slide, Annie. Yeah, so this is where our current set of systems work. Obviously, research and innovation and Polygence and opportunities like Polygence are at the heart of helping students learn what they want to do in the future. We believe in them doing hands-on projects. We believe in them developing their critical thinking and problem-solving skills. And for us, and it's a problem where many of our students study in curriculums that don't have maybe the exploration of an IB or an A-level. So they need experiences outside of that in order to gain these skills and also understand whether they're ready for that in an undergraduate setting later on. In terms of a lot of our one-on-one mentorship, that's also for the skills that they want to develop. We have one-on-one mentorship for students who want to get into debate programs. We have several students and alumni who've been on the Indian World Schools debating team who come in and help students. We have students who help with advanced and competitive mathematics and Olympiads. We also have students who advise students on how to go about social impact, how to go about passion projects like podcasting and creative writing. So a lot of these are done through a suite of sort of one-on-one engagements, as well as working with organizations to design after-school programs. So for instance, some of our school students might collectively attend, a summer working in a makerspace out in Goa. Some of our students might end up spending the summer doing work with a development think tank in rural India. And that ties into them understanding how their work can start making an impact right from high school and how their subjects can go beyond the textbook and into application. And most importantly, we see the role of students mentoring other students. So we do try to work with a lot of our graduates and alumni and have a mentorship program set up with them where they have seniors that maybe are just 2 or 3 years older than them that have been through this process that can talk to them and guide them in terms of how to make the most of their time in high school. And coming to the theme of the presentation in the next slide, I think that's where especially during the pandemic and after that, we've understood that that support has to extend beyond support on the academics, extracurriculars, and co-curriculars. Students have a lot on them, and frankly speaking, the pressure, whether it's balancing academics with their research, with their SATs, has just constantly been increasing. So we've decided to run a lot of sessions on study skills, on well-being. We've started working with organizations that provide mental health support to students and to parents, because we understand that there needs to be support from the household. Sometimes these students are in high pressure environments. So we also have a suite of sessions on well-being, on how to study effectively, how to focus on productivity. And also, each of these coaches is also attending additional trainings to identify when students are feeling stressed or need additional guidance, counseling, and support. And and then that also finally boils down to, and what we eventually end up having to help most of the students with, is identifying the right next institution for them. So on the next slide. So this is what we say, that we want our students to find their true north. So the idea is we start in 11th grade having conversations with them that once they've been through this process, when they started identifying their interests, where is the right university for them? And they might not be tied to a specific country. We always say focus on institution over reputation, over the country that it's in. We go through a set of exercises with each student to identify what matters to them before we start talking about colleges. Because, and again, in India, students often struggle to find that information, and the first thing they do is they turn to the rankings, whether that's QS, whether that's US News. But we try to point out to them that the ranking systems might factor in a lot of things that don't matter to them and their families. And we also try to introduce them to, admissions officers, as well as, alumni and outreach officers who can talk to them about non-traditional options. For instance, if a student's passionate about math, maybe instead of going to a college in the UK, they could go to École Polytechnique in Paris, which has a wonderful program for a lot of them. So the idea is also to find the right kind of learning environment from them. And we also, again, this is where the alumni also play a great role. For instance, since when we started, we found there was not a lot of awareness about, smaller, primarily undergraduate colleges in the US, even schools like Williams and Wellesley, a lot of high school guidance counselors didn't know about. In fact, the first year we were working, we had a student get into Williams with a full ride, and her high school guidance counselor told her not to go because they'd never heard of it. And a lot of this has been, educating parents, educating counselors about supporting the students in their search for options, and to help them find options beyond what they've heard about from maybe family or friends or neighbors. And also, this ends up being a longer engagement with our students. I think one of the commitments we make to our graduating classes is that we're happy for them to stay in touch. So as you'll see on the next slide, we spend a lot of time keeping in touch with our students, advising them when they're in college on course selection. Even we have a pre-departure session where for many of our students, it'll be the first time they're visiting the countries that they're going to be studying in. So we sort of explain culture difference, even in basic things like setting up a bank account, or financial literacy might be something that some of our students need a bit of help with. But beyond that, do they need help with understanding how to go about the job search or internships? Many traditionally oriented universities in India have on-campus placements, so students don't have to worry about the job search, while students overseas do need to spend time researching the companies they're applying to for internships and eventually jobs. And actually, what's been very interesting, and what we noticed as our earlier cohorts have started to graduate from college, is a lot of them are coming back to us for guidance for graduate school, and it's something we commit to help them with. So in fact, from our 2023 and 2024 graduating classes, 40% of our students have come to us for help with graduate school and are actually successfully attending master's or PhD programs right now. So we see that this relationship is something that's lasting for a very long time in most cases. And yeah, so I think that covers it. And once again, thank you, Annie, for the opportunity to present. I'm also really looking forward to Marina's presentation as well. And if you have any questions, we'd love to answer them in the Q&A after this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shayantan, for those fantastic insights and the really interesting presentations that you've shared with us. As Shay said, feel free to start posting your questions in the Q&A for our Q&A feature. And now I will pass it over to Marina.
Thank you so much, Annie. Shay, thank you so much. It was wonderful to get to know about your organization as well. And I love what you said about authenticity and the one-on-one individual growth, which is vital for the college process and certainly values that we hold as well. I wanted to share a little bit about who we are, about Kogeda Education Initiatives. So we're based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, although we also have counselors in various parts of the world, in parts in Asia, as well as throughout the United States and some in Europe as well. And so we like to talk about ourselves as redefining admissions. And the reason why is it goes back to what Shay mentioned about so many of us caught up in rankings and stats, and so much so that it takes away from really the value that you bring into our world, into your family, who you are as a person. And that's an important thing to echo today, because we don't just want to be a stats to a college application or even in our lives, right? We need to be able to take who we are and feel proud of it and develop ourselves in the best way possible. So we redefine admissions by guiding students and families to acceptance of their desired fit schools, while inspiring students to be mindful innovators of their own lives and making the process as streamlined and low stress as possible. Could you go to the next slide, Annie? And I mention the low stress as well, because of the fact that we have so much weight on those stats and brand name schools, right? Sometimes we lose ourselves on that. And the way to once we start to understand that we ourselves are valuable as a person, separate from those school rankings and names, then it does actually become a lower stress situation. Especially as you start to realize, wait a minute, these schools that I thought I was interested in, I'm actually not interested in those anymore. They're not that great of a fit for me. So, there's one of the greatest things that people say about feeling about mental health and having strong mental health is when you feel a sense of control. And restructuring our view of the way to look at admissions will help us do that. So we're members of these international education organizations that do hold the values that we also really like to share with our students, and both from the high school related organization as well as the college related organizations. And I've been a leader, chair, and designed workshops for many of these organizations as well, including how to develop for schools, how to develop your guidance counseling program. Could we go to the next slide, Annie? So just really briefly on our services, we do go through pretty much the whole gamut, from the point of entry of admissions all the way to the acceptance and everything in between, including social emotional learning courses, writing courses, essay advising, and some self-identity and character development, along with the activities planning that's authentic to the students and the courses, to get a sense of, well, what courses should I be taking that is authentic to me, but also something that the colleges would read well for. Can we go to the next? Thank you. For the college students in particular, we do the one-on-one semester coaching, which basically means that students who are really just interested in some brief mentorship throughout their college years, we support them along with the career development and into grad school applications for many of them. And then we also do a parent college where we support the parents too in helping them understand what the process looks like. Next slide, please. The things that we feel the most passionate about is the reason why we do what we do. And this is what we consider to be the 5 domains or 24 competencies. And what this is, and I know it's in very small print, so I'll just mention a couple of these. So for example, on the very bottom rung, it's the identity and character development. Once you know more about who you are, then you know the direction that you want to go. And it could be the same direction of those brand name schools and getting those straight A's, of course, which we always encourage. But it could also be, as one of our students who's homeschooled did, was his dream goal is to be a manager of a stable. super happy with that particular position. But then we also have students who are right now, because I've been doing this for 25 years, and right now the chief of surgery of a major hospital in the United States, right? So there's so many different ways of looking at this. Once you get a sense of who you are as a person, what makes you tick, what your diamond is in many ways, then you can figure out more in the direction, both academically and emotionally and psychologically, where you want to be going. Can we go to the next slide? And so then what does that mean from a day-to-day in terms of our work with you? Well, it goes into 4 buckets. We work on character, academics, activities, and the admissions process. So within the character pieces, some of the students are coming in with various time management skills. Others are coming in with various public speaking skills, et cetera. And so we take a look at, through multiple assessments that we go through, that we have come up with our own, as well as those that are pedagogically proven, and many of ours are pedagogically proven that we've come up with. It is an assessment of your character, that first rung that I mentioned on the growth chart. So based on that, then we help to build where your strengths and your weaknesses are. And in the most authentic way, right? And it's not just about what we think it is, it's something that where you also have reflected deeply on, and then that can help determine the academic path that you would like to go into. And then there are, so of course, those nuts and bolts that you just have to go through anyway, sort of separate from your identity pieces. So we help through that, when to take the exams, et cetera. And then the activities pieces that are the most relevant to you, the most authentic to you. What are you passionate about? And I think this is something that Shay, you had brought up too, those passion projects, but it could also be a deeper engagement in your own school, too, of things that are already existing. And then in the admissions process, that's the last bucket. How do all these 3 things come together into the admissions world, into that process, so that when you come out of the process, you are looking at the highest, best possible options for yourself that's a great fit for you. And most importantly, you have learned an incredible amount of who you are and how you can be an innovator of your own lives. Can we go to the next slide? So we go very briefly, I'll just mention this, is we go through a 3-step journey: discovering your diamond, making an impact, and finding your fit. So discovering your diamond goes back to that identity piece that we talked about. And then how do you make an impact? We are a global organization. We are a socially minded organization. We really like students to think of yourself as people who are very strong potential impactors of our world, and how can you do that even now? And then also through your thinking pieces of who you are, then how do you find your fit for the best schools, but also even for your own career in the future, and then even on a day-to-day of how you can contribute to the people around you. Right now, it could even just be your family. Next slide, please. So then that ability to reflect is something that is an important aspect of life, pedagogically proven, so important, so that once you know your strengths so well that you don't repeat your own mistakes, you learn about learning, about how to create authentic happiness. There's a metacognition that's involved here, so you can have new takeaways and beliefs, improve yourself, and find new opportunities. And it's a process for lifelong learning. That's really what we help set up with students. And in so doing, then, because if you think about what's essential in today's world, right? Like, it's that lifelong learning, but because the only thing that's certain in our world, right, that is certain is the uncertainty, right? It's the change. So how can you catch up if you don't reflect, to that change that's going on? And that's how we approach our admissions process. Next slide, please. So step 2 is we go help you from taking your local mindset of the activities that you're doing up to an international level in an authentic way. And not every student is a great fit, or do they desire to make it into the international level. But for students who have that desire, it is a good fit for them, we do support students with the strengths that we have as an organization, and the strengths that the families often have or the school has, in some way, to really utilize those resources around you and to make that impact as possible. Okay, next one. And then finally, finding your fit and what that looks like. One of the things is that these days, it's not just about that one single major that you pursue for the rest of your life, right? For 4 years in college, even. It is an interdisciplinary field of interest that includes many ways that you will impact the world through your career, as well as the transferable skills that you learn from those particular things that you learn in your activities, in your day-to-day life, in your interactions with people. And that's what our focus is here, is how do we help you bring in all your multiple passions together, assess your skills and your strengths so that they can read well to not only to the college admissions process, but in your day-to-day life. Can we go to the next slide? And so just sharing a bit of the student reflections, again, because we are so focused on that student development along with the process of the admissions of our students who have gotten into the most selective schools in the entire world, but also what we take in pride in are where the students have gone emotionally and psychologically. So where they have mentioned that they built their confidence as a student, that they are able to exert themselves even more out of the classroom, taking more leadership positions. For very strong performing students, they're able to realize that they can make that their passions and take it into a higher level to make a difference in the world. Next slide, please. And then in terms of how our students and parents describe the changes that our students have, and even the families themselves, the parents have, is that when we've done surveys after a few months, after several years even, and like I said, I've been doing this for so long, some of our kids are married, our kids now, are actually now full adults with their own kids, have talked about how our work has increased their confidence, enhanced problem-solving skills, making a positive impact for others and several others that are not on this chart as well. Okay, can we go to the next? So I didn't share with you some of our case studies, which I think you'll find very interesting in terms of how our students from the very beginning when we work with them to the very end, how they have made that difference in the world. But that's really what that beautiful process is in our work in redefining admissions. And when we work with you, we can find out more about that, and you can learn more about these case studies. And it is all about discovering your diamond. Those students who have made that impact have discovered that, and it is an ongoing journey where that they make an impact on a day-to-day as well as in a larger scale long-term, and then finding your fit with, again, not only the schools that you are applying to, but also within your own roles in our society, which is really what we want, right? Like we really want to have good kids, right? Working on really good on very important issues so that we can have a better world, right? I know this is a very lofty ideal, but this is really where we need our society to be, considering all the problems that are existing in our world today. And the reason why I do what we do is because you really are the key to that. And that's where our passion comes in, to help you do that in the fullest way possible. Okay, thank you, Annie.
Thank you so much, Marina, and thank you, Shayantan, as well, for just your incredible insights and perspectives, and from your years and years of experience in building expertise in this space. I think it's really refreshing to hear your, to use Shayantan's phrase, true norths of just supporting students in their journeys to build meaningful lives and careers of impact. So I'm so excited to jump into our Q&A. We've had lots of great questions coming in from participants. And so I will start us off with one that I know is an emerging and increasingly just sort of evergreen topic in the world of college admissions, which is grade inflation. We know that so many students who are now applying to schools in the US, especially selective schools, that so many students are submitting 4.0s and the sort of the top grades. And so how do you all counsel students about that reality and how to not get stressed out about it, but also to grapple with it in other places of the application?
I think
Feel free to
it's
jump
enough for
in.
you guys to try. Yeah, I'm happy to take this first, and Marina can add to it. So I think this is definitely like a real conversation we end up having with students on a regular basis. I mean, and I work mostly with students in India, but I mean, we have a similar version of GPA inflation happening here where most students are getting very high percentages. If you even look at the distribution of Indian board results, we have scenarios where there are individual schools we're working with where more than a dozen students have an aggregate above a 99%. So that does make students anxious because they understand that, it becomes very fine margins, and a lot of these schools use ranking based transcripts as well. So the difference between being first in your class and 10th in your class can change drastically. In these situations, we also help students understand that, look, especially if you're applying to the US, universities look at context over a 4-year window. They want to understand your subject choices, why you've made them. It's also important to have a dialogue with your teachers and your guidance counselors who are writing your recommendations so that they can present the student behind the marks. Similarly, it's also, it's kind of understood that it's not just about grades, it's about, what your interest areas are and how you've been able to pursue them outside of whatever the constraints of your curriculum have been. So we say that, look, if you're able to convince a university that, that you aren't just mechanically getting your grades, there's an intent and a pursuit and a passion behind them, and that some of that might be shown through complementary activities and co-curriculars, it's absolutely fine to, miss out on a percentage here and there, but be more interesting in other ways. And it's important to have that dialogue with the teachers and with us and with your guidance counselors in school as well, so that they understand that you're a passionate person and they can go to bat for you when it comes to sending in an application.
Right. Thank you, Shay. I just echoing what Shay said. And one of the things that the admissions officers will do is do a holistic review. So the context is really important. It may not even just be the context within your own school, which is also important, but the context of your own life and your own family. What's going on? What are some of the things that are going on regarding the grades if they're not that strong? Are you showing competency areas in other areas that they're looking for that year or just in general? So I wouldn't get too stressed out about those grades as like, oh no, I'm never going to get into what people call a good college, right? It is so contextual. And instead of stressing out about that, what I encourage is to focus on what you can control. And if you think you can control getting those better grades while learning in the best way possible, because it's really what we're looking for, right? The learning piece, then do it, right? And I know there's so many other ways that you could use your time, that you may want to use your time, but you also have to just think about realistically, well, what am I looking for in college too, right? And so if you're looking for the most selective schools, the reality is that they will be looking for those high grades. But again, holistic review, not necessarily only that. So my advice again is focus on what you can control, assess what your goals are, and then get some resources to help you build towards that goal.
Thank you both. I completely agree. So the next question, I'm smiling because I think I'm an example of this. The question is, am I disadvantaged if my true north changes midway? And as someone who did almost the entirety of an environmental science major before switching to my passion in international politics, I have thoughts about this, but why don't we again start with Shay and then to Marina?
I think, again, I think it's also about the fact that, like, I don't think you're disadvantaged. I think, if your true north has changed, it's probably changed for a very good reason. And I think you should, again, if any of my students comes to me and says, what, it's changed, most of the time it's a very proud moment for them to have figured out, a new sense of purpose for us as mentors and advisors. So yeah, long story short, no, it doesn't disadvantage you. Yes, you might have to recalibrate. You might have to, start maybe a couple of steps back and try to figure out a few things maybe faster. But I think it's usually when your true north changes midway through high school or midway through university, you're in a position where you've actually maybe done some homework, you've gained some perspective, and you're actually ready to, roll up your sleeves and really commit to the next path.
Right, couldn't agree more. And the admissions officers, they know you're a teenager, right? I mean, they know that your life, I know when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, even when I was 25, I felt, young and old at the same time. And I felt like I needed to have my entire life figured out because there were also people around me that did. The admissions officers, that's not what they're looking for. So don't worry if you switch it 2 or 3 or 4 times. That's actually okay. What's important is the why, right? Really, that reflection that I mentioned. Why are you doing it? How are you doing it? Is it to try to escape something that you didn't think that you're not maybe that good at, or actually maybe you're really good at it. We had a student who's really good at math, never believed in herself, so kept running away from it, running away from it, running away from it, and then finally she comes back to it, and she was flying, right? She put her time in, and oh my gosh, she became like this math champion. It was kind of impressive, right? So again, just don't worry about feeling disadvantaged in any way. And in fact, just focusing again on those pieces that you can control and those reflections. Why am I switching? What are the reasons that this particular field can help me be the person that I want to be? And where can I take this to again support my family, my society, and myself in different ways?
One thing that I will add here is to this question asker, I would recommend you look into Clay Christensen, who was a Harvard Business School professor, and he loved the concept of true north. And he often talked about how derailments are inevitable along the path to your true north. And in the moment, it might feel like those are steps off of the path, but they're actually the biggest growth opportunities. And so changing your course can sometimes be a leg ahead because you've had to grapple with the uncertainty and the complexity of a derailment in your path. So certainly really, really inspiring work from Clay Christensen. So I have sort of like 2 questions that I'm going to combine together coming in from our audience. They're both about balance, and one is a student who's writing in, and one is a parent who's writing in. So the parent asks, as a parent, how do I balance helping my child achieve the most out of their high school days, but also letting them fail and learn resilience? And then there's another question, which is just about time as a student. Do you have to fill every single minute of your day to feel as though you're doing everything you need to do to prepare for college? So maybe we just keep this order. Shay, if you want to start us off.
Sure. So I think when we're talking to parents and students about balance and, making the most of their time without, you know, overburdening themselves or stretching themselves too thin, I think the conversation always shifts to 2 things: priorities and control. You can't, increase the number of hours you have in the day. You do need to have time for family. You need to have time for yourself. You need to also have time to sleep, is something we end up telling students a lot of the time. But it's important for them to understand that, all right, if I want to do a dozen things, it might be important before I fit them into my schedule or I plan to do them all this week, that I set in order which of the are my most important things on my plate, which of them are my what we might call the non-negotiables, which of them are the things that I want to do that would make me happiest, and which of them are, the so-called frogs I have to eat to, so that I don't face more problems later. And we have this conversation with them. And one of the things we really recommend with students is, it could be journaling, it could be some other tool to sort of sort out your tasks and your priorities. It might even be something as simple as just having a to-do list and calendar synced up on your phone, where you can put things down, visualize them, and help them understand. So even for the parent, I think it's very important to help, your child learn to sort of visualize what they have on their plate, visualize that, okay, how much of this is really important to what I want to do and what I want to achieve. and basically let them take control of that. Because I think it's very important in high school to teach them that control. Because you're going to be sending them off to college very soon where they will be in control of absolutely everything. So giving them the tools to do that in high school is very important.
Right. Thank you, Shay. Completely agree. We had a student that came to us actually at Harvard looking to, I was mentoring her as a part of the Harvard College program for mentorship. And one of the things that she had said was, I got here, my mom helped me get here. I don't know what to do next without her. And that is not a uncommon, thing, is that when we as parents, I'm an older parent of a 3-year-old right now, and I sometimes find myself doing that. Like, oh, no, I'm gonna do this for her, I'm gonna do this for her, right? Because we love them so much. But what we're doing, right, is taking away from the students' sense of developing themselves, their resilience and control, as Shay mentioned, and that control, as I mentioned earlier, from even psychological level, is one of the reasons why people are happy. It does create a happiness in their lives. So even though it doesn't feel intuitive at the moment, it's certainly, we are taking away that happiness and long-term happiness in a student's life. But so how do we do that, right? How do we help students learn resilience, but also help them stay in control? One of the things that we do with our reflection exercises with students is, and also with parents, is how bad is it? Like if the student were to make their own decision on something, are we really looking at something that's going to blow up in their face into something so horrible that our life is ruined forever, right? So there's that extreme. And then there's the other extreme, right? It's like, this is such a tiny choice, picking out clothes and whatever, right, of the day. So then where is that medium? And then where is the impact of the choices that you're making? And if we can just reflect on that piece and where we are in that bar of that, then developing the resilience, helping students have control at any of these time points is always going to be number one of a priority, but assessing what those risks are. Right. So for example, my 3-year-old, she was like, oh, cool, I want to touch the stove. That was actually still very hot, right? Having control over that, I'm just like, no way, right? Because the risk of that, right, isn't going to work. But her picking out her own clothes and playing outside for 2 hours on her own, unsupervised, where I'm there, but she's like actually on her own doing it, actually has shown pedagogically and psychologically to have created, to create lifelong skills that you can't really develop in the same kind of way as these vulnerable identity forming teen years. So I recommend for the parents to think about where that scale is, and reflect on that. And then for the student, no, I don't think you need to be filling your day every single second of something that's related to college. In fact, I 100% say no to that. And with that advice, by the way, our students are at Harvard or Yale or wherever they wanted to go. For some students, it was a liberal arts college, others it was a community college, right? So, and why I mentioned that is that there's a thing called turning the tide. And I'll, Annie, I'll also quote a Harvard professor, Richard Weisberg. He is at Harvard Graduate School of Education, our alma mater. And one of the things that he talks about is that there is a thing of where it's like it's sort of overdone achievement. It's like, you just don't, again, why are you doing these things that, is it for college? Is it because you really want to? So just think about, it's Turning the Tide, check it out. They have some incredible things in there. And it is assessing where, again, going back to what Shay said, where you want your priorities to be. And that it shouldn't be filling in your every single minute of your day for college stuff, but it could be something for your own enjoyment that can lead to your higher success and for that innovator, of the own world that I mentioned earlier.
Thank you both. This next question pulls at my heartstrings a bit. So, do you have any advice for those battling imposter syndrome after achieving success or attending a school where they're surrounded by people who they feel are achieving more than them?
Wow, yeah. Again, I think very reasonable. I think, I don't know about Manny and Marina, I think this is something that sometimes we even felt when we made the transition to university ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think a large part of this, it's very important to understand whether you're trying to judge yourself by the way you're seeing your self-perception be reflected in how others perceive you. Because at the end of the day, say for instance, you're attending a school where there will be a lot of other high achieving people around you. Um, it's not a rat race, and that's something we find ourselves trying to tell kids all the time, that rather than looking at your situation as, oh, I might be out of my depth, is look at it as an opportunity, look at what you're gaining from being where you are, and focus on, looking inward and self-reflection at that point. Because a lot of the time, imposter syndrome comes from the sense that if everyone around me might be better at a few things that I'm maybe not so good at, will I fall behind? Will I miss out? Will I be judged? And the other part is also recognizing that maybe some of the people around you are feeling the same way, and to not isolate yourself. Because what we find is students who have peers that they respect and respect them, they're a lot happier in those ecosystems. And they also need to acknowledge that it might be beneficial to have someone in your life who is better at certain things than you, that you can learn from, because there are probably things that you can also give them that you might not appreciate but they really do.
Yeah, thank you for that. Completely agree with that. One of the things from a psychological standpoint is that many students do feel that way, and it's not just you. 100%. And it's not even just you and your peers, adults, professionals, the President of the United States, anyone in this world has felt that and could still be feeling that right now. So couple sort of, I guess, tangible tips that I could give you regarding this is, just really thinking about, most of us are just really generally good people, right? Where we want to help others. So when you find your friend feeling down about their own selves and that maybe they're just not doing enough, they're not good enough, etc., think about the language that you would use for them, that empathy that you give to them, right? And then use that language for your own self. That's something that we often forget to do. The very advice of kindness and care and compassion and empathy that we give to others, we don't give ourselves. So very important that you do that. The other thing too is to celebrate your successes, is to don't just brush it off. That's actually quite important. I think we sometimes live in a self-deprecating culture, or maybe even within our social friend groups, sometimes that works. But when we're really thinking about, hey, I kind of did this thing. I created this app that helps other people find out more about themselves, or, whatever it could be. One of our students did a sports app where the students were able to match nonprofits associated with what they were interested in much more quickly with this app. Awesome, right? Celebrate that. And take a look at factually, cool, where's this going? Where can I make it go stronger? And if you can celebrate those achievements that you've had in some really strong ways, that will also, in authentic ways, and then listen to other friends too, right? Who tell you, oh, cool, you did that. That's something to be proud of, for sure. So helping that, doing that will help you internalize your success, right? Taking time to applaud yourself. And then the other piece is, this is particularly true of some studies have shown of a lot of women, girls, so there's certainly also for men, boys too, is to let go of your perfectionism, right? That sense that I have to be perfect. What does perfect even mean? Really, right? It is such a different definition for every single person. And so you are creating a box for yourself. You're creating that imposter syndrome for yourself. So rather than aiming for perfection, just focus instead on your progress, and that valuing that over perfectionism is going to be much stronger for you in just your own mental health, and it'll help you let go of your imposter syndrome more quickly.
I'm so grateful for both of your perspectives on this. And I think like the one reflection that I would add is that it's so easy for imposter syndrome to show up with the big questions, but also with the very little things. Like, for example, I went to University of Virginia, 7 out of 10 students there are from Virginia. And so when I arrived as an out-of-state student, I already had so much imposter syndrome built up in the coffers that I remember seeing in the first class that all of these students had multiple highlighter colors on the reading for the class. And I was so hung up on the fact that I had not prepared the reading by using multiple highlighter colors, and it triggered imposter syndrome. I was totally prepared. I just don't learn in that way. And in hindsight, I was only able to sort of understand that their imposter syndrome should not causes us to think that we should fit molds that don't always work for us. And so what I would encourage the students in the audience to think is just that the more that we're aware of imposter syndrome, the more that we can see it when it shows up. So I will now pivot to a totally different topic, which is international students. And Shay, I'm curious for your perspective here, though, Marina, I know you also work with international students. So I'm going to group these questions together to make sure that we get everybody's in. Are international students disadvantaged in the admissions process versus domestic local students? And what are some of the main challenges you see students facing who are from outside the US but end up attending college in the US? So once they get there, what are those challenges they encounter?
All right. I assume the first part of the question is directed at students, international students aiming for admissions in the US. So
True.
I'll answer that specifically. It does depend where you're from. Because admissions officers are also looking at the context of, they're not looking at all international students as like a homogenous mix of students. They will look at cultural context, where in the country you're from. So, for instance, we have a pro bono program where we end up working with a lot of students from, small towns across India who are first generation. Not all of them will end up studying in the US, but a handful do. And for example, because these students are, usually applying for financial aid, but a lot of them are very interesting stories for admissions officers, and I wouldn't say that they're disadvantaged, but yes, it can determine the level of competitiveness of certain colleges. If you just, and I'm speaking to this from a very Indian context where there are a limited number of Indians that a college can take, and there are a lot more of us applying now than any previous years. I think Dartmouth's nice enough to publish the India-specific numbers of applicants, and I think that number has jumped from a couple hundred in the early 2000s to almost 2,000 applications from India last year just to Dartmouth. They obviously can't increase the number of places correspondingly. But again, I think it's important that you have to understand that, there are factors other than just, are you an international student, that colleges are looking at. There are ways in which you will be judged against, your peer group within your city. So if a student is applying from a lot of students in small towns in India get deterred saying that, hey, we don't have the opportunities or resources that a student from a Delhi or a Mumbai is getting. And we tell them that, look, whenever we've spoken to admissions officers, they're very well aware that someone from a town, in India that's maybe 60th or 70th in the country by population is not going to have access to the same level of opportunity or resources that someone from, the top IB school in Mumbai is going to have. Trust them to understand your context, and often, it works out very well. We've seen a lot of these students actually, end up at schools like Harvard, because the admissions officers have given them that opportunity to tell their story and share their context.
Right. Agree, Shay. I think in terms of whether international students are disadvantaged, it's nuanced, right? There's so much to that, or there is a socioeconomic standing, there's the regions that you come from, whether it's not just like coming from India, or it's not coming just from China, it's within even those regions as well. And also, if you think about the fact that there are many high performing students that are applying who are international. No, I'm not saying those are the only students who apply, but I'm saying if you take a look at populations of those international students and kind of do an assessment, a lot of them are the higher performing students of that particular context of that school. And that's also one of the reasons why they wanted to apply to the US, because they have, they know that they can maybe be competitive candidates. So taking a look at the fact that there are just a lot more stronger students in the international pool, that there are also, I mean, we have to be understanding to the schools, right, to the universities, where they're trying to make a very strong, diverse community. Let's separate the affirmative action laws for a second here, but they really are trying to create the most diverse community that they can. And so they can't have too many international students from just one location, but whatever that location means, right? Maybe it's in a certain one region of a particular country. We've had students who are orphans, migrant students, very disadvantaged from us. They worked at they were coming from some schools that were known to be sort of scholarship students sponsored by big companies in Korea and China, across Africa and Europe. You know, we've had just students from all over. And those students, to be honest, were probably looked upon a little bit more with advantage than those that were coming from those high profile international schools where you know that 20 other students in your class have the similar grades and are trying to apply to the same schools. Sure. I mean, yeah, your intuition's probably right. There is a little bit of a disadvantage there, but I wouldn't call it a disadvantage, to be honest. These things we just talked about, I wouldn't call it a disadvantage. I would call it as an opportunity for you to really think about your own unique self and how you can stand out in your own identity, not as a way to try to fit in what you think colleges are looking for. There's so many ways of looking at that, and that's one way of looking at it. And in terms of the challenges that international students face, imposter syndrome is one of them, like many of us. But the other is, again, depending on the schools that you're coming from, but I'll just give you one example. Students that were coming from international schools abroad thought that because they were already in an American school style system, that when they come to the US, they would be a piece of cake. But in actuality, they had harder times adjusting to the United States culture, American college culture, than other students because of the expectations. They had an expectation that it was not going to be that different for them. Whereas the public school students, let's say from Korea, just throwing a random country out there, comes over and they're expecting it to be different, right? And they're learning, okay, I'm going to make sure that I learn how to do this and do this. Whereas the other students like, I'm good. And so there are some challenges there. And that's just one example of many. And that's what our Beyond College program is all about.
Thank you both
Yeah,
so much.
second like
that. Okay, so we have 2 minutes left, and what I'd like to do to close us out is ask you both this question, and in, I don't know, let's say 10 words or less, like what is your answer to this question? What is the one thing you wish every student applying to college knew and believed?
All right. So I think, again, I think I'm going to come at this with my specific context in India, is where many students are fixated on the academic side of things, is that I want most of my students, and the first conversation we have with all of our students, to understand that college is just the next step in a long series of steps you're going to make as you transition out of your teens and into your 20s.
Thank you.
And thank you, Shay, I completely agree. That you are more than who you think you are, to think beyond college.
Incredible. We will end on that note. I can't thank you both enough for your incredible insights and perspective and sharing your expertise with our audience today. We didn't get to every question, and I apologize for that, but please feel free to follow up with us to keep asking these questions because they are really big ones. Congratulations to all of the students presenting today, and have a great rest of your symposium.